Hi guys and welcome. So in this video we're going to be going through this roof repair on this Volkswagen Scirocco. Now there's going to be a two-part video. We're going to go through the repair and the prep and the primer and everything in the first video, and then we're going to go through the masking and the actual paintwork in the second video. So this is a 2015 plate Scirocco. Something's flicked up on the motorway and just caught the roof at the very front there. So we're going to start this job off pretty much from the very beginning by giving this car a wash off. First thing we're going to do is just make sure that we mask off the vulnerable areas of the car where near and close to where we're going to be sanding. So one important part really is the windscreen edge here, because obviously one thing we don't want to do when we're using any 80 or 180 or anything is get any scratches in the glass, because we are talking a pretty much brand new car. And if any of you guys have done one of these Volkswagens before, you'll also know they've got a very fine bonded in rubber just underneath the window there, so we don't want to catch that either. Now, block wise, I'm using the Dura blocks, just a kit that I bought recently. Really have to say I do like those. An initial prep work just on this repair area, we're going to take a P180 Arbonette and we're going to give this top of this roof a really good key up and take all this paintwork down on this area, so that when we put the filler in, we've got a really well keyed area to start putting the filler in, and also to make sure that any of this paint where the damaged area is, just to make sure there's no high spots in there, and make sure that all the paint is ready, basically prepped, ready to take our repair material like our stoppers or fillers or whatever it is you might be using for this job. With this being such a fine and such a shallow repair, all we're going to be doing is putting a little bit of stopper in this roof here, and that'll be enough. We don't really need to go with a heavyweight or a lightweight filler for this. You could do if you wanted to, but using stopper just sort of kills two birds with one stone really. Now you'll notice I'm trying to keep this repair nice and small. Obviously with this being a new car, I want to try and get away without painting too much of the car and doing too much blending work if I can, to try and keep as much of this car original as we can. Now, down these little areas where it's actually had the impact to the paint, I've got, same again, the Abronette sheets. I'm going to make sure that all these broken edges and damaged areas of the paint are well keyed up and also blended out so they feathered out into the existing paintwork. Now, they are low spots, so you could say, right, well, you don't really need to worry about it too much because obviously we're going to be stopping over there. But what you're going to make sure is where that's had the impact between whatever it is that's actually hit it and the paint and the steel, that there's nothing there that's going to flake off and cause any problems in the future. Now, for the first skim, we're going to use the Pro Work stopper, which says about a medium grade stock. It's a bit like Top Stop Gold if you want. It sounds really well. It's a bit cheaper, but for a job like this, it's absolutely perfect. We can get a nice initial smooth skimming, and a job like this, possibly we could get away with one skim, but you're probably looking at doing one skim to get it 99% there, and then your second skim just to get it that last little bit and make sure there's no little pinholes and no issues with it anywhere. Now, for this, you want to make sure that, usual scenario, same as your mixture filler really, you're looking around about a golf ball size of filler to around about a large pea size worth of hardener, and you want to make sure you mix that in really well. Make sure you've got no uneven areas to make sure that when your filler goes on, it goes off nice and evenly, and you won't end up with any problems with your repair further down the line. Application wise, what I'm doing is I'm making sure I only put this on in really light coats. Now I'm concentrating on the lower spotted areas first, just making sure they've got a fill and make sure that that's nice and wetted out. And what I'm not doing is I'm trying not to get any build on the other side of that roof lip, because the one thing that I don't want is to be getting anywhere near that rubber or on that edge, because I want to be able to just key that up easily and prep that easily ready for paint. To start off with, on the actual stopper itself, we're going to be using the P80, and we're just going to use the P80 just to knock this back down and get this. I'd say you want to try and really work. I work about trying to get this repaired about 80% of the way there. Again, I'm trying to keep my repair area as small as I can, which is why I'm using one of the smaller blocks rather than a long block. It's only a really small, shallow repair. It's not over a long length on the roof, so I don't really need a big block and a big sheet on there. so I can get away with using a small one and just knocking it down bit by bit and feeling your way through your repair to make sure that you feel happy with how the repair looks and feels, which is the most important thing. And you really, when you're feeling for the repair, you want to be using the flat palm of your hand and your fingers flat on the panel so you can really feel just how low or high that is. And I always find that, as you can see there, just wiping the excess dust away, because sometimes even the excess dust can leave a bit of a feel in your hands, like your repair's not quite there, or it is there when it's not. So it's best to always just give that a quick clean off, even if it's just brush it off with your hand and just double check and get a real good feel to make sure that everything feels as you want it. Because one thing you don't want to be doing at this stage is start rushing it. Now, one thing that I find with most stoppers, you'll see me changing the pad there, is that when you initially start sanding most stoppers, they do actually start clogging your disc up until you've got that initial top layer knocked off. Now, the Evercoat Flowable that I use quite a lot, that doesn't actually clog your discs up. That's a lot better. But I find that this particular ProWorks one is very much like the Top Stop Gold. I say it's a medium grade, but it's a good high quality stopper. By medium grade, I mean sort of medium thickness, really, more than actual grade of materials that you're using. So it's quite good for stuff like this. It's a real nice consistency. You can spread it on really nice and clean, and get your repairs really nice straight off your spreader, so that when you come round to actually blocking them down, your filler work is a lot closer to where you need it to be than say using U-Pole Easy One or something like that, where it's quite stodgy, it goes on, it leaves a lot of pinholes, it draws quite a lot as you're pulling it with the filler spreader, which can cause you a lot of problems and leave it quite uneven. And the other good thing these Abronet strips is, as you see there, I'm just knocking that out, and straight away I've got a nice clean disc to carry on with. Now, on this edge here, I'm just making sure that edge is nice and clean with a bit of P180, because that's going to be our final finish for the actual filler work. And once I've got this repair to the point where I'm happy with it, or that I'm happy that it's 80% of the way there, I'm going to now change off. I'm going to put the P180 on, and we're just going to give this that last little rub down just to make sure that that repaired area is right and everything looks good and everything's ready to go. So the first thing we want to make sure is we've got a good fresh sheet on the block ready to tackle this second sanding stage, as I'd call it, on the roof, which is just finishing off that last tiny little bit to make sure that's perfectly flat, and also giving that filler and those 80 scratches that last little bit of refinement they need, so they'll take that primer and we'll have no problems with the primer and sinkage down the line. It won't take a lot. I prefer these Abronet strips. They're a lot more cost effective compared to your average sanding discs. The average sanding discs, yes, are a lot cheaper, but you'll go through twice as many. And as you can see there, when I use ones, I just chuck them off to one side, and that saves me in the future. If I've got a small repair, I can just pick one of them up and go again. Now, for the actual third stage, we're now going to the actual prepping the last bit where we're going to prime the car. Now, for me, I've got a P500 on the D8, and we're just going to DA around these edges, just making sure again that we take out any little extra bits of the sanding scratches around the edges, and leave ourselves a nice little area that we can prime, and it's nicely keyed up so that when we put the primer down and we start sanding the primer and everything, all that's nice, all that's sanded right. It's got a good key for the primer to take to. None of the edges where we're going to back mask off in a minute, none of them are going to be glossy, so it leaves that really nice, properly prepped area then to take your primer. So as you see there, again, so far in this repair, by the drying times that I've cut out, this repair really has taken no time at all on this roof. So all I'm using here is just a microfiber towel. I like the microfiber towels for just a quick dust off like this with your airline. It'll just help you get rid of any excess dust off that repaired area before you start masking for your primer. Now, prime wise, all we're going to do is we're just going to basically back tape ourselves a little square off around this roof. Now, if you put 4 flat pieces of tape straight down on this roof, you prime straight in that area, and you prime up to your tape, you're going to leave yourself huge masked edges on your primer. You're going to be getting your block out. You're going to be spending a lot of time blocking those built up edges out, and that's one thing that you don't want. So I find the best way to stick a bit of tape in reverse, like so, and then use another little bit of tape just to fold that back over. It leaves a nice little rounded air gap in the edges of the tape there. So even if you really quite heavily went and primed in that area and weren't too controlled with your gun, you still end up with a nice soft edge around those edges. And you're not going to end up with too much of a build up that you're going to have to faff around and start blocking out at a later date. Now, you can see I'm going well inside that area that we've sanded to make sure that that masked off section in the middle is well keyed up. Now, primer wise, we're going to be using a 2K Capsi High Build Black primer. Black's going to be black or grey for something like this is going to be the easiest. I've got some black in that I'm just trying out, so I decided to use it on this job. So that's what we're going to go for this roof. It's only a small, easy repair, so we're going to give that a little bit of a test as well. Now, one of the easiest and most effective ways, if you're not using something like a heat lamp to mask around the area that you want to prime, is just cut off a little section of poly roll off your roll, and we're just going to chop that out now, and then just carefully mask that down. And when we mask it, we want to make sure that we don't press down too hard on those areas that we have back tape and made our little soft edges on, because we don't want to mess them up and leave a hard edge as we go. Now, a little job like this, there's no real need to bag the whole car up. You're putting a tiny amount of primer on. For me, as long as you're covering up a more than good enough area that any tiny little bit of overspray is not going to creep any further than that, because we're not going high pressure or anything. The masking in this way for this little roof repair is more than good enough, bearing in mind the kind of job we're doing. We can keep this primer if we set a gun nice, we can keep it nice and local, we can keep a gun control well, so we're only going in that little area. And you'll see in a second, I've just pulled the bag out around the extra part of the car. Now, I'm doing this with a 1.8 tip. We're only really going to put 2 straight coats down on this. We're just going to put one down, let that flash off nicely, and then we're going to hit a second coat down once that's flashed off. That's going to give us enough build. We've only done a small repair. We've not done a harsh, intrusive repair, so there's no need to be putting coat after coat after coat on top. If you thought your repair was still a little bit off, then possibly you could go 3 or 4 coats like we do on a normal job. So for something that I don't normally show, we're going to go for the dry panel prep and also the blending prep that we're going to be doing and using on the car. All I've done is just I've masked a little bit of a ring out around the roof, again, just to protect those vulnerable areas while we're doing this. So the first stage for me is I've got the 3M micro finishing discs. I'm using the P1000. With this being a straight solid colour, you could go to a P800 or even maybe even a touch lower. For me, I keep thousands in stock, so I'm just doing the blend prep on this exactly the same as I would on any other car. Now, what you want to be aiming for really is to take this back and take the peel out and leave this a really nice matte finish all over, so you've got a really nice clean prepped panel to be doing your painting and your blending on. Now, the actual colour for this, I had the colour matched for this. I took off part of the car, took it to my local paint suppliers, and he got me the best match I could, because really I didn't want to go into blending any of the pillars or any of the rest of the stuff. I really wanted to try and keep this to the roof. Now, the customer asked me at the time if I was just going to do a blow-in on the roof. For me, yes, you could do a blow-in on the roof. You could paint the corner in and you could do a clear blend. It's not something that I'd like to do, especially not on the roof. I think it would get left a much cleaner, nicer job to actually prep this roof properly, do a full re-clear of the roof, which didn't really take much time. And it did come out nice and clean. There was a few nibs in it when it was finished painting it, so we gave it a really fast dry flat with the DA on the sander, and then a wet flat with a 3000 Trizac, a quick polish, and it was straight out the door looking $1 million. So for the extra little bit of work, the extra little bit of materials, if the option's there and the customer's willing to pay that little bit, bearing in mind obviously it is a pretty much brand new car, you want to try and make sure that you do a job like this to the best you can, leave them with the best finish on their car that they can. So you've ended up with something that basically at the end of it really looks like it's not been touched. Now you can see I've already sanded the repair off. I forgot to press record on the camera for that bit, I'm afraid. But that was quite simply, we blocked that out with a P320 and then I blocked it. And then I did over that with a P500. Now, the actual rest of the panel is all going to get sanded down, as you see here, with a P1000, making sure we get all that area keyed up and all that area nicely matted off. And then we're going to switch to the Merca hand pads for a P1000, and we're going to go around all the edges and all the curves and all the little areas that we can't get to with a disc. One thing I will say is when using either of these, make sure obviously you don't get any rub throughs on your panel edges and just be a little bit careful. Now that's about it for this video, guys. In part 2 we are going to get into a very detailed masking stage and also the full paint stage, and a look at the car when it's finished so you guys can see what it looked like when we'd finished up with this. So I hope you've enjoyed this part 1 video, guys. A little bit more information in it for you, and I'll see you again for part 2.